Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. Glad to have you back. Got another great episode for you. Today I want to talk a little bit different. A lot of times, I'm talking about things that are on my mind, but I was reading an article. I'm an avid reader and spend a lot of time in business stuff. And so I came across something that made me think about dental. And it kind of made me think about the way we handle our business and what are we in business for. And I'm gonna, if you'll do me the favor, I'm gonna read a little bit of this, just a small section of this article because I think it's important for you to hear. So this is the editor of Inc. magazine, and the story goes in this article is that the editor of Inc. magazine was locked outside of his building. He gets there one day and he's got his editorial team, which is not known for being great locksmiths. And so they get there and they're locked out. And so he says, gosh, I got to get into my building. And when he goes to get in this building, he calls a few locksmiths, right? As we all would. Like, imagine yourself being locked outside of this building and you're trying to get in your dental office, for instance. And for whatever reason, all the keys don't work or whatever it is. And you're trying to get in your dental office. And you've got patients coming and you're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And so you're called this locksmith. So put yourself in that situation. So he reached out to them, and the first one simply wrote that the price estimate was $29. And then 18 minutes later, they said, I promise I'll give you the best price, right? And we see this in dental. Like, think about that for a second. We see this in dental, right? That people out there are saying that they'll do a crown, a cleaning, x-rays, and cook you breakfast for $12, right? I mean, and I'm exaggerating, but you see that, right? I'm going to give you the best price in town. Come to me. The second wrote, it's $125 to open the door. I just need your phone number and address. Right? When you could see that too. Just, hey, you just give me the phone number and address. It's about $130 and I'll be more than happy to come right away. By the way, dental office. I want you to relate this, by the way, for a moment to a dental office. Like, you can see the first one. Hey, look, it's the quickest price. It's the because we're gonna pull this back to dental, and I want you to think about your business. And as you're thinking about dental wealth, and how do you create this business that runs by itself? Because ultimately, if you've listened to my podcast at all, or you listen to me, period, read any of my books, I'm all about creating this business that runs by itself. That ultimately speaking, that we stop becoming this owner-operator, the person who feels like an employee that's trapped down to their business. And we get to a place where the business runs without us. That means we don't have to be in the chair. We're not stuck anymore, right? And then we get the time and money to do the things we want. And so, this is a great example. I mean, and this is why I'm going through this, by the way. I'm going to keep going through these, but I want you to hear it in that context, is that you can see the second office is basically like, look, this is what a crown cost. And, this is pretty simple. They weren't rude. They just said it's $125 to open the door. We just need your number and address. Hey, a cleaning, exam, and x-ray is typically this much. We just need your insurance information. Like, you can hear that happening. Pretty simple. And by the way, they weren't rude, were they? Nobody was rude in that scenario. And the third one didn't offer a price. They said, yes, we can help. They wrote instead, call us to verify your address. So that seemed like they just didn't give a price. They just said, now this is the dental office that says, we don't quote prices. We don't tell anybody a price because we need to see them first. By the way, that's the vast majority of dental offices, if you think about it, right? Hey, how much does a crown cost? Well, we can't tell you that because we have to see you first. And I get all those things. I'm just kind of giving you an example that you can relate to. The fourth came from a guy named Jay who wrote me this. He said to this editor, thank you for the detail. Would it be possible for you to send me a quick image of that handle to make certain that I can give you an accurate quote? Here is my direct email address. Now, the question is, what happened in that exchange that's different than the other three exchanges? Now, you might have listened to the first three exchanges and thought, well, those are acceptable. Those are acceptable exchanges. They are. They're acceptable. There's nothing, you could argue those are acceptable. But they're transactional, aren't they? They're transactional in nature. These are transactional things. It's 125. Send me your address. It's very transactional. Where this person really is saying, hey, listen, do me a favor. Hey, send me an image of the lock so I actually know what I'm working with here. And if you don't mind, send me an email, and so that, I can actually do some more, find out some more information for you, give you an accurate quote, which is, by the way, some of what you do with a patient. Hey, I can't give you an accurate quote really until you sit in my chair. But I'm going to bring this back to how we handle those in a minute, because I know what most people are told. Now, in a matter of minutes, what he found out was that in these 4 competitors, half competed on price alone. One wanted his business but didn't work for it at all. Then there was this guy, the only one to address me by name. I want you to hear this for a second. The only one to address me by name, thank me for my time, or ask me for any information. I sent him a photo of the lock. He replied, thanks again, and explained the project would cost between $99 and $198, depending on whether they needed to replace the lock's core. Now, a few minutes later, he followed up and said, hey, I got some bad news. My technician is at a supplier. And when we showed them an image of lock, they could not replace that core. And then he described in detail why the job was complicated and could cost up to $300. And by the way, you've seen that in dental before, right? And that's what we're afraid of if you think about it, right? Is this, if you give them a quote, when we give a quote over the phone, like if your front office person gives a quote over the phone, the concern is, well, one, I don't really know what the situation is. And then 2, like I don't, what if I'm wrong? Like I can give you a quote, but until I actually see the work, I don't know what's going on. Now he said that's a full $271 more than the guy who promised the best price. So of course I said yes to them. When he increased his price up front, he also increased my trust. I knew what I was getting in contrast. I had no idea what I'd get from his competition, but I was pretty sure it wouldn't be a $29 bill. Now, in this call, he arrived to do the work, and afterwards, I talked to him about his business. Now, he's no dummy. He knows how his competitors operate. I stopped there for a second. I always say that in dental, it's really easy to dominate. As a matter of fact, in most businesses, it's easy to dominate. Like it's it's easy to dominate because most of what your competitors do is the exact same silly thing as they all do. Like nobody looks at the market space. And I would argue this, like I could walk into any of your business, no matter how successful you are, and you've copied probably 90% of the way you do business from everybody else. And you have to argue that that's pretty true. I could probably, without ever walking in your dental office, explain exactly what happens when I walk in the front door, exactly what happens when the hygienist comes and takes them back, exactly what the treatment plan process looks like. Like it's pretty much easy to identify. And so in this example, he says, I know how my competitors operate. Prices and communications are usually vague in an effort to overcomplicate the process, which leads to bait and switches, he explained. So when he started his company after losing everything in the recession, he saw an obvious path. Now I want you to hear this. The idea was position myself as the good guy. He says trust would be my competitive advantage. Now, a lot of this is actually, and I'm going to just read a certain section and then I'm going to move on and I won't talk about it again. What this person did, this locksmith did actually, was he said in the article, are you in business to serve others? Or are you in business to serve yourself? I want you to hear me again. Are you in business to serve others, or are you in business to serve yourself? Now, this locksmith owner knows his company. He enjoys helping people and considers it a privilege. I quote, do the people answering your phone consider it a privilege to serve? Or is it a transaction? We recently did a workshop and we called a few offices just to see what their front stage experience was. And it was so interesting. There was only one of them that stood out. All these doctors in the room, by the way, we had some really bad phone calls, but there was like one of them that stood out. And while her language could even use a little tweaking, I would argue that was really good. But that wasn't great. That wasn't what the great part was. The great part was this person picking up the phone. She wanted to serve. You could tell she wanted to serve. You could tell that. Like, you could tell listening that she wanted to take care of the patient. When the patient called, she literally truly was like, I want to serve this person. And by the way, she had not come from a dental background. She came from a background of a different career. By the way, you guys think you need dental people, which I don't understand why, but this person was service oriented, and they picked up the phone and they really wanted to get to know that person. And in this example, the reason I went through this is because sometimes it's good to hear an article or hear something outside of dental. And so it's no different. Their other 3 locksmiths were transactional. They were, hey, here's how much it costs. Some of them undercut like you do in dental, right? They'll try to undercut you. We don't care about those people. That's not really your competition. But then the vast majority, hey, this is what it's going to be. But what you need to understand is the most important thing you can do on that phone, even before they show up, is to build a relationship. When they walk in, do you truly build a relationship, or are you transactional? Now, before you start coming back, now, first thing you're going to say when you hear this is, of course we build relationships. At our dental practice, we are always building relationships. Call your office. Have someone call your office. And I want you to listen to that phone call. And I ask you, would you want to spend time with this person? And it's so important as a leader. I want to listen to Dental Wealth. You're as a leader. Are you somebody as a leader who makes relationships a priority? And I'm not talking about just with your patients. By the way, you as a doctor, you might be a phenomenal at building relationships. You might know every single person. You might know their backgrounds, their when they go on vacation, and so might your hygienist. I'm talking about your entire operation, and especially here, the people that pick up the phone. See, what happened was in this article, he was saying, as the business owner, I make sure that by the way, I can dominate, not compete. Most of you are competing, but I can dominate the marketplace just by simply building relationships. By when somebody picks up the phone. Now, this isn't just about phoning, but so many of you have bought it. There's so many companies out there selling you all these phoning systems, and some of you try to outsource your phoning or try to train phoning, or it's like this. There's companies that have built their entire name around phoning, and it's. I would argue that if you haven't taught them to build relationships, you're wasting your money and your time. That at the end of the day, we all want to be treated like people, don't we? We do. We all want to be treated like people. And by the way, when was the last time you had an amazing experience? Most of you can remember it, and you tell everyone about it. And that's not what happens when most people call the dental office. Now, I'm not talking about someone being kind. It's not what I'm talking about. By the way, you might call your dental office, they might be kind. But I'm talking about someone who really, truly builds a relationship. And by the way, if you can reach out. I'll send you a phone call. What a great one sounds like. But I'm talking about this idea of a phenomenal relationship. And you as a leader, here's the greatest question. Are you in business to serve others? Stop. Right there. Are you in business to serve others? Have you decided to take this on to serve others, or are you there to serve yourself? And by the way, this is a hard one, by the way, just so you understand, this is a hard one to answer because naturally we honestly naturally, because most of us feel like we believe ourselves to be great people. So we naturally go, well, no, I'm here to serve others. That's a natural response. But I would argue with you that 99% of dentists would tell me that they are, and 99% of their offices would not reflect it. Do you hear what I'm saying? And I'm just holding up a mirror and saying, does your office truly reflect? And by the way, if you do believe in servant leadership and you are a servant leader and you're I want to take care of people, maybe even a better question for you is, does your organization then reflect your service heart? Is your organization, so is your business there to serve others or to serve you? And you say, well, Eric, I'm in Dental Wealth Podcast. What does that have to do with wealth? I'm like, everything. Because what ends up happening, it's the same thing as an identity. The last podcast I talked about identity. And if you didn't listen to it, you need to go back and listen to it. As a student, you need to listen to it, because this idea of identity, and does your organization identify? So let me give you an identity of servant leadership. Chick-fil-A, right? It's an identity of servant leadership. And it literally, like when people think of Chick-fil-A, they think of servant leadership. It literally is the identity of the organization. It is their pleasure. It is what they like love. So the question for you then is that the identity of your organization? And the reason I said to call up front is because you'll find out really quick. Well, that's just Susie, and Susie's new, and so she's not trained up yet, and she's your organization. And in fact, what do they say? You're only as strong as what? Your weakest link. And so if the person who's communicating with people calling your practice, if the person that's communicating your messaging, by the way, that's the person who initially communicates your message. If that person isn't communicating servant leadership and isn't communicating your heart, then your organization isn't identifying as that. Like, do you just enjoy helping people and consider it a privilege? And do the rest of, does like everyone else in your organization, I want you to hear that again. I enjoy helping people. Part of your identity. I want you to, if you listen to that podcast, like did you write this down, or write this down as part of your identity? I enjoy helping people and consider it a privilege. Now you have to give people resources so they're not so overwhelmed they can't focus. But does the person who, and by the way, and I'll give you an example of what I mean. Let me give you another example. So I go take my son for blood yesterday. He's got to get his blood drawn. And he's 12 years old. So how does it feel to be 12 years old and getting a giant needle in your arm? Like, how do most 12-year-olds handle that? Now, I have a 12-year-old who sometimes, like, he's like stoic. Like like she was saying before he came in, like there was a guy that was like 6'1" who basically passed out. And yet she treated my son like he was nobody, and didn't say like, hey, this would be a little bit of a prick, this is going to be a little bit of a pinch. Hey, look away. Hey, here's a ball to hold on to. She didn't smile. She didn't, and by the way, the organization she works for is an amazing organization. And I know the people who run the organization care about people, but yet my 12-year-old son sitting in the chair about to have the largest needle put into his arm he's ever had. And literally this lady could have cared less. Like, it was transactional in nature. And I'm not saying she's not a good person, because by the way, she might be an amazing person. But the organization, no matter how much they've tried to believe that they're there to serve others, has not instilled it in their identity as an organization. And this is the key to earning trust, by the way. When you build relationships, you build trust. And so the key to earning trust is really truly building relationships and wanting to care. And so sometimes we get transactional. Do you enjoy helping people and consider it a privilege? Are you in business to serve others or to serve yourself? And now some of you have, like, maybe even at this point in the podcast said, no, I got this. Yeah, we serve other people. We're good. We care about everybody. Susie up front's great. All right, next podcast. Let me go to the next one. And I would argue if you've done that, you didn't listen. Because it's the people that, by the way, last podcast I talked about identity, the most successful people, I guarantee you the most successful people have like written like tons of notes listening to this podcast, and they're completely analyzing it. And they're like, oh my gosh, do we do that? How can we do that better? Is there a more way? What do I need to be doing to communicate that? Should I be communicating my weekly meetings? Like, because identity of a servant leadership company is something you own. And when you do, by the way, all this notion of like, let me give your front office a script of exactly what to say. Now, by the way, they need to know what to say under pressure. I'm not negating that. But if they don't truly understand this is there to serve people and they're not really in this for the relationship, they're going to be like the other three locksmiths. And by the way, if you listen to the story, the locksmith ended up charging quite a bit more than anybody else quoted. We'll even pay more money for people who treat us like people, who talk to us, who spend time. So when you think about your business, what I want you to get from this podcast today, what I want you to think about is, as an organization, would you say that your identity is a servant leadership organization? That you get to serve others, that every single person believes that, is passionate about that. They're not there for money. They're not there to make another buck. They damn sure don't have some kind of crazy incentive plan that puts money first instead of patients. And these are people who really truly love our patients. All of them. All of them. And if you let someone stay in your organization who doesn't believe that, by the way, you're failing as a leader. It's just truth. If you don't like it, it's just the truth. I'm sorry. If you allow those people to stay in your organization, because you are only as strong as your weakest link. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think through this today. I want you to think through this, and I want you to really, truly analyze your organization. I want you to think about the fact of, are we really there to serve others? I want you to call your office. Now, I don't care, have your wife's phone or your husband's phone or a friend's phone, I want you to call your office, and I want you to ask to set up a new patient appointment. And I want you to listen to that phone call. Or have a friend just come into your office and go through the experience and find out what happens. Because I think it's important for you to know that if you're going to build an organization that runs by itself, that you can be outside the dental chair, and that you can be, ultimately, that's what I want for you. I want you to be outside the dental chair, not having to work clinically, having an executive team, a leadership team, an organization that runs, if you're in Tahiti, that continues to provide income, and you do not have to sell it. If we're going to have that, we need to have an organization of servant leaders, and we need to make sure that we put others first. Hey guys, I hope you've enjoyed listening to this podcast. If you haven't had a chance, check us out on YouTube. Sometimes if you're, a lot of people listen to this. I see the numbers. I mean, we have so many subscribers and listeners on, the audio version, but I would also encourage you to go to YouTube and watch it, because sometimes you get to see my facial reactions, and that's such a huge part of this experience, is seeing my face and seeing, it's just like someone behind a door versus getting to actually see them. And so there's an experience that you're missing, if you're not actually getting to watch this. So go on YouTube, watch it, like it, subscribe it, share it, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.